Madam President, I rise today to talk not about legislation or about the tax bill. Well, I may talk about the tax bill a little, but I do want to talk about deadlines. How we do our work, how we all do our work, whether it's in the United States Senate or in our businesses or in our personal lives. I want to talk about deadlines missed and deadlines that don't exist. One of the realities of this place that I think is very unfortunate is that we rarely make our deadlines. And these are self-imposed deadlines. These are deadlines that we create. We pass a law that says something has to happen by September 30th. We set the deadline, and then we don't make it. Most notoriously with budgets. I don't know when the last time we had a budget on time. I think it's like 17 years ago. I suspect there are probably less than a dozen senators in this chamber who were here when we last passed a budget on time. There's no excuse for that. The problem is when we put it off, we don't know anything more than we did at the time of the deadline. We could have done it, and yet because we're able to, we do. That's human nature, unfortunately. Who among us would not have put off the deadline for a book report if we could have said to the teacher, gee, I don't think I can make that Monday morning deadline. I'll just do my book report on Tuesday. Life doesn't work that way. In the real world, there are deadlines. There are consequences if you don't get your work done on time. Things happen. And if you don't get your work done on time, usually those things that happen are bad. I don't know where else other than in this body where deadlines, which have enormous implications and enormous importance, are simply ignored. Now, I just sat in the last day or so and put together some real deadlines that we have in the law right now. What are they? Well, the Children's Health Insurance Program deadline, September 30th, 2017. That's gone. That's passed. I can give you 23,000 reasons that we should have met that deadline. That's the number of young people in Maine that are covered by the Children's Health Insurance Program. 9 million nationwide. But we missed the deadline. Why? I can't find any reason. We don't know anything now that we didn't know in the middle of September or in August that we could have passed this program, but we just blew right by it. Maybe it's because none of our kids are in this program. I'd venture to say if the children of the members of the United States Senate were in the CHIP program, we would have met that deadline. But we didn't. What's another one? Community health centers. Another deadline of September 30th that was missed. I'll give you 200,000 reasons that we should have met that deadline. That's the number of people in my state of Maine that are served by federally qualified health centers. I was at one just on Friday. They serve people who otherwise wouldn't get care. They fill an enormous gap, particularly in a rural state, to provide health care to people who need it. But we didn't make the deadline. No particular reason. No reason not to make this deadline. We just blew right by it. Not all that important. I'd venture to say if our families were covered under this program, we would have gotten it done. No senators' families are covered by federally qualified health centers. If they had been, we'd have gotten it done. Of course, the granddaddy of all deadlines mentioned is the budget. October 1st, 2017. We missed it. No deadline. We just went right by it. Nothing happened. Well, what we did was pass a continuing resolution. A continuing resolution really should be called a cop-out resolution. It's basically saying, we're not going to make the decisions, the hard decisions in a budget. We're just going to push them forward for a month or two. But the problem is the month or two comes, and in fact, it's coming this Friday. And now we're talking about another continuing resolution to go into January or February. No business would do this. Families can't even do this. Some time ago, I was the governor of Maine. And I remember vividly, I can practically tell you where I was standing in my office. We have a deadline in Maine of July 1st for our budget. We always make it. And members of the legislature of one of the parties came to me. They were having a very hard time getting a budget. It was very contentious, as the budget is every year. And they said, Governor, let's just do a continuing resolution like they do in Washington, and we can solve this problem in the next 2 weeks. I said, not on your life. Because if we do, once we open the Pandora's box of continuing resolutions in Maine or in Iowa or in Mississippi or Florida, then we're stuck. We'll never get a budget on time again because it's too easy to put off the hard decisions. What do we know now about the budget that we didn't know in August? What will we know in January that we don't know now? And by the way, a continuing resolution for the entire budget is bad for the government and disastrous for national security. I serve on the Armed Services Committee. We have hearings both from our civilian leadership and from our military leadership, and they have told us repeatedly, please get us a budget. The continuing resolution doesn't allow us to plan. It locks us into last year's priorities. It doesn't allow us to look forward, to make commitments that will save the taxpayers money if we have the authority. It is a disaster for national security. But a deadline was missed on September 30th. It looks like we're going to miss another deadline on December 22nd. And we'll be here talking about funding the government, doing the budget, sometime in January, maybe in February, and there's no reason for it. There's no reason for it except that we're simply avoiding making difficult decisions. The next one, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The real deadline started on October 6th. That's when people started to lose the ability to re-up their qualifications for DACA. It's over 100 people a day are losing their DACA status. In the last week, it's been, I think, something like 1,700 in the last week or 10 days. These are people who are going to go into the holidays unsure about whether they're going to be able to continue to live in this country. And these are young people, as we all know. This is the only country they know. They were brought here as little kids. They weren't illegal immigrants. They were brought here as children. And they're contributing to our society. And they're working, and they're paying taxes. But we missed a deadline starting in October. Now, even the president says we should fix this program, and he gave us 6 months. He said, I'm going to disallow the program, but not until March 5th, 2018. I don't know whether it's legal to bet in the District of Columbia, but I'd be willing to bet that we're still struggling with this question on March 4th, 2018. I deeply hope not, because lives are being toyed with here unnecessarily. We could make the decisions now. We could decide and reach a compromise agreement on this program, which members of both sides of the aisle think needs to be done, including the president. Let's get it done. But it's one more missed deadline. National Flood Insurance Program. Deadline, December 22nd. 4 days from now, I don't think we're going to make it. And if ever there was a time of the importance of the National Flood Insurance Program, it's now. We've had enormous flooding issues with the hurricanes in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and yet the flood insurance program expires on December 22nd. Why don't we get it done? Because it's not our houses. It's not our houses that are at risk to get the flood insurance. I suspect if we had the houses that were part of this problem, it would be solved. Medicare Extenders expire on December 31 of this year. Are we going to get those done? I deeply hope so, but I'm not so sure. The FISA Section 702, one of the most important national intelligence provisions that we have, also expires at the end of the year. Are we going to get that done? I deeply hope so, but I'm not optimistic. Wildfires, FEMA disaster aid for Harvey, Irma, Maria, and the Maria wildfires. These are huge disasters. We have partially funded them, but certainly not to the point that's going to be required. And those deadlines were all through this fall. Now, at the bottom of my chart of priorities is tax reform. Boy, are we going to make that deadline. The only problem is it doesn't exist. There's no deadline for that. There was no deadline. It's not December 22nd. It's not Christmas. It's not New Year's. It's a self-imposed deadline that's not in law anywhere. And I agree we need to do tax reform, but we have been doing it on an unprecedented scale and speed that's unnecessary. We've missed and ignored all these real deadlines in exchange for focusing all of our attention on a fake deadline. Sure, it would be nice to get it done. And we could have gotten it done. We could have been done on a bipartisan basis. We could have started last summer. And we would have had a bill, just like the bill that emerged from the Health Committee with regard to health care on a bipartisan basis. But instead, it was a closed process, done with unprecedented speed, with virtually no hearings, no real hearings on the bill, no serious outside experts, no analysis of what's in it. We've been given a 500-page bill that we're going to vote on probably in a day or so. And yet, we're racing to meet a deadline that didn't exist. It's boring to talk about process, but that's what I'm really talking about today. I just don't understand an institution that doesn't make its real deadlines and yet races and throws everything aside to try to make a deadline that just came out of the air, that's not in any law, any rule, any expectation. Let's just do it by Christmas or by the end of the year. It's no way to run a business, and it's certainly no way to run a government on behalf of the American people. I have never been in an institution or in a group of people that are so capable as the people that are here, and I find it genuinely puzzling as to why we perform so poorly, why the public opinion of us is so low, because these are good people on both sides of the aisle. And yet something about the way this institution works keeps us from meeting the rules and expectations that the rest of the society takes for granted, like making deadlines, doing your job, doing what you're paid to do. One of the most fundamental responsibilities is to pass a budget. We have members of our Appropriations Committee who've been working for a year to put the budget together. It's done. And we could do this. But instead, we're putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And I would be surprised if come January or February, assuming we don't make it by this Friday, there are going to be people who say, let's just do a continuing resolution for the rest of the year. A cop-out resolution, a non-resolution, a non-decision on behalf of the people of this country. Madam President, I think we can do better. I think we can begin to regain the trust of the American people by going back and doing things the way we're supposed to, according to the old norms, with hearings and considerations and making deadlines and meeting our obligations to our citizens and to our country. Madam President, I deeply hope that as the year turns, we also make a turn. And we make a turn to do this place better, to do our work that the American people hired us to do it on a timely basis, and to meet our responsibilities. I believe we can do it. I believe we can do it better, and I deeply hope that we do so. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.